This show contains movie spoilers and swearing. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bitesize Cinema. I'm your host RJ McCready, and for this episode I'm going to be taking you guys back to the year in 1980 to look at Roger Corman's action-adventure sci-fi classic movie, and that is Battle Beyond the Stars. That's right, I knew I was going to get around to doing this one eventually. So let's fire up now, let's take on the evil Sador, let's go back to the planet of Akira. Let's play you guys a trailer and I'll see you soon.
Ruthless Invaders, a defenseless planet. Battle beyond the stars. A lone youth escapes on a last-ditch mission that begins at the edge of the universe. The story of a boy who finds more than he expected. Burn. And all he can handle.
Does your species have kissing?
Oh, yes. We have that.
Try one. That's a hot dog. It comes from Earth. Do you like it?
There's no dog in this. Soybean meal, niacin, dextrose, and sodium nitrate flavoring.
That's what we call meat back home.
Battle beyond the stars. Starring Richard Thomas, George Peppard, Robert Vaughn, John Saxon, a battle beyond time, beyond space.
Nice and fire!
That ends in a desperate gamble.
They'll be able to board us.
It won't make any difference.
Get that hatch open! No!
Battle beyond the stars.
And welcome back, guys. So the synopsis of this film is: a young farmer sets out to recruit mercenaries to defend his peaceful planet, which is under the threat of invasion by the evil tyrant Sador and his armada of aggressors. It's an action-adventure sci-fi. It's got a 104-minute runtime and it's a PG. It got 5.5 on IMDb, which I think it could probably do with a little bit more than that. I think it's a little bit more better than a 5.5. And it was directed by a guy called Jimmy T. McCarmy. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's known for directing other films such as Heavy Metal, Humanoids from the Deep with, I think that's Doug McClure in that movie, which is another, I think it's another Corman film, which I'll get onto in a minute. He also helped direct the Raymond Briggs' The Snowman and the incredibly... I find this movie terrifying, actually. I haven't brought this one up before. It's When the Wind Blows, another Raymond Briggs film, which I remember watching. It scared the hell out of me when I watched it in a very sort of creepy way. And Roger Corman, of course, he's a legend in Hollywood. He's an independent film director. He's made, he's been involved with 416 movies. He's directed 56. In fact, I could possibly do a whole show on him himself, but I will just round this up a bit. Basically, Roger Corman is a guy that you go to if you want to make a movie, and if you're going to make a film for around about $50,000, $100,000, he'll probably finance it for you, and then he'll give you full control. and he had a run of independent films, especially from the 70s into the 80s. There's a whole ton of them. Go and check them out. He created a independent production company called New World Pictures, which is involved with this movie. And just to name a couple of the films you might know, Philadelphia Experiment, Chud, The Stuff, Vamp, and more famously Hellraiser. So yeah, he's, like I say, I could probably do a whole episode on him, but Roger Corman is a name that you are probably familiar with in the movie world. And yeah, he's still going, still making movies, which is great stuff. So he really has helped people get on board in the film industry, you know, such as famous directors and actors. Let's just name a couple of those. So with directors, he helped kickstart Francis Ford Coppola, Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese, Joe Dante, John Sayles and James Cameron. And with actors, you had Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, Bruce Dern, Sylvester Stallone and William Shatner. So he has helped out a lot of people kickstart their careers. He's given these guys opportunities. But as I said, I could probably do a whole episode on Corman, but I'm here to talk about the film that he made, one of his big movies, one of his biggest independent movies that he spent $2 million on, which was a lot of money back then. But I think with this film, $2 million is a lot of money, but it's still not an awful lot of money in Hollywood in those times. So you do get a lot of film for your buck with this. And when I talk about a lot of film for your buck, let's mention James Cameron right now. James Cameron is, you know, a very successful film director. He directed Terminator, Aliens, and Titanic. He also, one of his latest ones is Avatar. But he started his career out as a special effects whiz, you know, technician, whatever you want to call it. Which is something I'm actually in awe with. I actually love building stuff like that myself, just as a hobby. So I kind of get that. And this would have been some great times to be about as a special effects guy, because I'm very fond of making stuff from scratch. And I think James Cameron turned up and he literally was left to get on with it. You know, he made all the spaceships in this film. He made all the sets and stuff like that, and he was literally making stuff out of McDonald's cartons and really just making it up as he went along. So underneath this film, having a look at all my sort of online resource in the internet, he was kind of like the sort of backstage hero to this film. And when I say hero, I think he deserves that hero title, because he also just slept anywhere on set. He didn't actually go home for a number of weeks. He just stayed there and cracked on with this movie. So, you know, respect to the guy. I've heard that he's supposed to be an awkward bloke to work with, especially looking at the Aliens episode that I did. But same time, he's a guy who has led by the front, and I think he's the sort of guy that would probably roll up his sleeves and get the job done. So yeah, full respect to Cameron. And also mentioning James Cameron there's also another guy from Aliens, the 1986 movie, that worked on this set, which is Bill Paxton. I didn't know that. He was actually a carpenter before he delved into the acting world. So he was working on the set of this movie. It's also worth mentioning the screenplay is by John Sayles, and he also went on to go and write Piranha. In fact, I think he might have written that before this. The film Alligator, which is another film that I've spoken about, and The Howling, which is, funny enough, another film that I've done a review on. But yeah, they're probably films that you're familiar with. And the pumping score to this movie, which I think is absolutely stand out, is like one of the heroes itself of this film, and I'm a massive fan of soundtracks. And I think they really, really, really did them well these days, you know, back in the 80s, which was James Horner. One of his first soundtracks, or one of his first major studio soundtracks, which is incredible. You will probably know James Horner for films such as he did Kroll. It's another one I'm a fan of. He did Star Trek: The Motion Picture, The Wrath of Khan. He did. Then he went on to go and do the Titanic and then Braveheart. And he's just, he's done some fantastic soundtracks. And regretfully, it's the late James Horner. We lost him a few years back. So, but his legacy is just amazing. So it's really one of those films where you can say, yeah, the gang's all here. It's got some names to it, as I've mentioned, Corman, John Sayles, James Horner, James Cameron, Bill Paxton's in there somewhere. And then on top of that, you've got a cast which is great, which is Richard Thomas, who plays the main character, Shad. And he he is responsible for that. When you're talking about Battle Beyond the Stars, people just, when I talk about this film, people say, oh yeah, there's a guy from the Waltons, Jim Bob, in a spacecraft. So he was famous for being in the Waltons. Robert Vaughn, who you may know, well, I remember him from The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and he also played Lee in The Magnificent Seven. And talking about The Magnificent Seven, I don't think I've mentioned this yet. Basically, Battle Beyond the Stars is a remake of The Magnificent Seven, and The Magnificent Seven was a remake itself of The Seven Samurai, which was either written or directed by Akira Kurosawa. Sorry, I'm terrible with surnames, but that's the director. But Akira. So Magnificent Seven, and this there is an Easter egg here because the Akira name of this director is obviously the name of the planet in this movie, so it's like a little bit of a tie in there, so that all ties in together with The Magnificent Seven. So this film is a remake of that. But going back to the cast, you've got George Peppard, who plays Cowboy, and for me, when I watched this film at the time, he was Hannibal from the A-Team, and he was basically, for me, Hannibal playing a cowboy in space, and he's really cool in this movie, and he is, how can I explain it? I'm going to go into a little bit of a segue now with Guardians of the Galaxy. He is kind of like Star-Lord's grandpa or something like that, do you know what I mean? I could sort of see that. So, and I can sort of, and the other thing I was going to mention, again, a little bit of segue here, you can sort of see the influences with those types of movies with, like, especially the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I can sort of see the tie-ins with this type of movie and that type of movie. And where today, and I think I've mentioned this before on my previous episodes, where today you've got the Marvel universe, which is fantastic, and you've got all the crossovers. So you've got Thor, you've got Captain America, you've got Iron Man, you've got Star-Lord. So they've all got their independent films, but then they all tie over. And I've always thought that you could have this tie over in the 80s with these movies. So you've got Battle Beyond the Stars, you've got Kroll, and then you've got Star Trek. And I think the tie over there is obviously the James Horner score. But I think the special effects, it's got the same sort of aesthetic to it. It's got the same sort of charm and all that sort of stuff. And I could actually see Prince Colwyn from Kroll team up with Shad, and also the crew of the Starship Enterprise go and take on, Sador and the Slayer and Khan being the bad guys. And I would love to see a movie with all those characters all in it together. So you've kind of got like a sort of an assembled movie, but with these characters from the 80s. That's just how my mind works, but I could see that. So you could possibly have, just imagine Prince Colwyn on the deck of the Starship Enterprise with his glaive, trying to help those guys out. So yeah, that's kind of how I see these films. I think they could possibly all be happening in the same universe somewhere. So just a little bit of food for thought. But let's get back to the cast. Man, my head's just running away with it. Sorry. Right. So John Saxon is in this movie as well. Talking about Sador, plays a bad guy. Plays it really well. He's got a badass hammerhead ship, which is probably a little bit of a rip-off from the Death Star, but I'll get into that later on. Sybil Danning is in this movie. She's looking lovely. She's an Australian actress. She was in a film with George Peppard, which was Operation Thunderbolt. And again, she's known for making loads of B movies, particularly in the 70s and 80s. And she was also in Airport 1979, Meteor, and the Musketeer movies. So that's the cast, or some of the cast in this movie. Let's have a look at some trivia. So I've already mentioned that James Cameron slept on the set most of the time. Oh, that's right. So Space Raiders is a film that came out a couple of years after this. So basically it's it's unusual for a B movie to get ripped off by another B movie. Space Raiders ain't a bad movie though. It's kind of does what it says on the tin. They use the same soundtrack, they use the same ships. I watched it recently, I was entertained, that's all I need to say. I think it's on Amazon, so go and check it out. The film was made, as I've already mentioned, for $2 million. It didn't do too bad at the box office. It did a return of $7.5 million, which I think was a big hit for Corman at the time. He also went on to go and sell the movie to Orion Pictures for a VHS release, which I think it then went on to go and do really well on the VHS as well. There is a comic book prequel that came out, which is called Battle Amongst the Stars, which tells you about the planet Akira and the ship Nell. And I think it's the Elder in this movie and his adventures, so it kind of gives you a little bit of a backstory there. And there's a mention of Cowboy talking to Shad about Sador, and he says that he's never lost a war. It kind of indicates that Sador may have possibly invaded Earth, and again, that's possibly like a prequel to this movie as well, which would be pretty cool. So there you go. There's some trivia. That is, as I always say, guys, that is the building block to this film. So let's do a bite-sized review of Battle Beyond the Stars. So the film starts off by propelling you into outer space, literally. You've got the James Horner soundtrack, which is amazing. You've got the credits that come onto the screen with Battle Beyond the Stars, and it's almost like you're in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon going into warp drive. So I would imagine back in the day this was a whole ton of fun at the cinema. And the plot to the story, and this is no discredit to it, is really just written on a napkin. And I have absolutely no problem with that, because I'm all about a little bit of a basic plot. I'm just here to enjoy the space ride. And it really is, you know, a bad guys fighting the good guys in outer space. You've literally got John Saxon turning up in his hammerhead Stellar Converter Death Star sort of rip-off. You know, I say that in the light sort of way. And he has turned up to the planet Akira to say, look, I'm going to blow you up in 7 days. And that is basically it. And the planet of Akira is peaceful. They don't really have any weapons. They just, all they've got is food, peace and tranquility and all that sort of stuff. But what they have got is this badass ship, which was flown by the Elder, which is a guy called Zed, and he's the guy who I spoke about who had like this backstory in Battle Amongst the Stars in the comic book. And he's basically said, yeah, can we get someone to fly the ship to go and recruit some mercenaries so we can take this guy on? And this is where Shad comes in. He's like the young farm boy, a little bit of a Luke Skywalker sort of theme there. Again, I've got no problem with that. And it is, like I say, Richard Thomas from the Waltons, and he's kind of like our leading character in this, and he does a good job. It gets into the amazing spacecraft, and let's just talk about that for a minute. And I watched this film a few months ago, and it really inspired me to then go and make this spacecraft out of modelling clay, and check out my webpage from Rags to Movie Props. I've got it on there. So, and you know, it's a very unusual looking spacecraft. It looks like it's very sort of reminiscent of H.R. Giger from Alien. It looks like it's got body parts on it. Something that went over my head when I was a kid, I never noticed the breast on the front, But I noticed that now. So yeah, it's a great spacecraft, and it is, the AI navigator, is just badass. She really does give our hero Shad a run for his money and sort of tells him to go and man up a little bit. So, with 7 days to go, Shad goes on a quest now, and he goes to a space station, and he meets Dr. Hephaestus, I think his name is, played by Sam Jeff. And he is he's partly android. I don't know whether to laugh at this scene or not, but again, when I watched it as a kid, there's a lot of stuff that went over my head. And he's basically, again, like I say, he's basically thought that, well, Shad's turned up to reproduce for my daughter because this is just full of androids, and then you can sort of continue the family tree for me, which, again, like I say, just went over my head when I was a kid. But Shad, there is a little bit of a love interest between him and this guy's daughter, which is played by the very beautiful Darlene Flugel. She is absolutely stunning in this movie. But Shad says that, look, I've got this problem on my planet, Sador's turned up and I need some help. But fair play to Shad, he turns down this temptation, and he says, look, I need to go and help my home planet out. So he has no luck in recruiting anybody here, but Narnia follows him in her own ship, which I'll get back to later. So Shad then encounters Cowboy, played by George Peppard, and he is a space trucker from Earth. And he just happens to be carrying a whole ton of weapons, rifles, blasters, all that sort of stuff. And Shad tells him about the problem that he has with Sador, and Cowboy is very familiar with Sador. As I mentioned earlier, there's that possible backstory here with Sador taking on or invading Earth. Shad helps Cowboy twice. He repels Sador's, I think they're called jackers, they're like the little spacecraft, like the interceptor fighters. And because Cowboy is running a little bit low on fuel, he decides to help him out. He decides to help out Keir and offers to train up the people with weapons and blasters and all that sort of stuff. Shad then goes on to recruit the 5 alien clones called the Nestor, and they basically say that they have an incredibly dull life, so they just want a bit of entertainment. He then goes and finds Robert Vaughn, and he can't go to any civilised planet because he's got up to so much mischief, so he basically says, I wouldn't mind going to a Keir just for a little bit of being able to wander around without anybody trying to kill me, so that's what he's in for. And then along the way he comes across Saint X-Min, played by Sybil Danning, and she is actually a Valkyrie warrior, which I think has connections to Thor and the Norse gods and the Vikings and all that sort of stuff, I believe, so you've got a little bit of a tie in there. She has a extremely fast enhanced fire-powered ship, which would be helpful, but Shad finds her a little bit annoying and he wishes her to go away, which is a little bit harsh, I think, because he's trying to find recruits for mercenaries, but she ends up helping him along the way. And then whilst all this is happening, Shad returns to Keir with his assembled mercenaries, but Narnia is captured by a reptilian slayer named Corman, and she's in a little bit hot water here. She's tied up, and then she explains to Corman that Sador is here to destroy the worlds, and then Corman says, right, well, in that case then, I've got a little bit of a beef with this guy, so I'll come and help you out. So I think he's kind of like the anti-sort of hero in this movie, so he becomes part of the mercenaries as well. So now get your first battle scene in space and on the surface of Akira. So our heroes now intercept Sador's hammerhead and the Maomori interceptors. So you get some, I guess you could call it some Star Wars stuff here. You get some dogfights here, you get some laser battles, all that sort of stuff. And then whilst all this is happening in space, you've then got a cowboy who has trained up the Akiras to fend for themselves, and you get some really good like laser battles between the Akirans and Sador's troops. You know, George Peppard is like doing all his gunslinger stuff. And you get some really nasty moments here, because the Sador's troops turn up with this like sonic sound tank, and it takes on the Akirans, and it's like lets out this sound, and they've literally like got blood coming out their ears, which is kind of really pushing that PG rating for this movie. I remember watching it the other day thinking it's pretty damn horrific, to be honest with you. But there you go, it's a good battle. I like the way, and like I say, I like the way you have the sort of battle on the planet and then the battle in space as well. And then you get our first hero who dies here, which is actually Gelt. He gets shot down, and one of the nesters gets captured as well. And I forgot to mention this because Sador is a guy who is aging. He's really old, and he's basically like Frankenstein. He takes body parts. And he takes one of the body parts off one of the nesters, and they basically use their mind powers to try and kill him. So it's like a sort of an assassination attempt. So they have to cut his arm off. So now Sador's like kind of like just got one arm, which kind of makes him even more of a badass, I guess. So then you've got you're coming up to like the final act of the movie now. You've now got Sador. He's basically launching everything at Akira. You get Saint Exim. She blows herself up trying to take out the Stellar converter. So with that taken out, and all of Sador's starfighter has been taken out by the mercenaries, but unfortunately the mercenaries have been taken out themselves, including including Cowboy, which I was very sad with back in the day. So all that's left is now Nell with Shad and Nanalia, and they are now captured by the tractor beam of Sador's ship. But this is where Nell comes up with the plan, and she basically says that there is a device on board the ship which will self-destruct. So Analia and Shad, they get into the life pod, and Nell gets boarded onto Sador's ship, and she blows up, and as she blows up, she takes on Sador's ship as well. So you get a huge explosion, and then that pretty much closes the movie. You get Shad and Ayla to go back to Akira, go and live their peaceful life. And they basically say that we will remember the mercenaries and what they did for the planet forever. And basically that's how the movie ends. So it goes from A to B very quickly. You've got some action, you've got some star fights, you've got some battle between the Akirians and the troops, as I mentioned. You get some blasters, you've got some really good special effects. You've also got, forgot to mention, you had some really good matte paintings in this movie as well, between the actual model spacecraft and when they land on the planets, and I think that still holds up today as well. I think it looks really good. I don't think Battle Beyond the Stars has a 4K Blu-ray release yet, but it certainly deserves one, so hopefully that will come out. But there you go, that is basically it. In a bite-size way that I do this show, that is basically it. It is just a sci-fi adventure movie. It's aging a little bit, but I think it's holding up really well. So if you have seen it, I know there's every time Battle Beyond the Stars gets posted on the Facebook page, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of fans, there's a lot of people like myself that grew up with this film. And I forgot to mention, yes, it is. It was made because of Star Wars. I think I forgot to mention that, you know, Star Wars hit the cinema, it went boom, and then everybody went, let's make a Star Wars movie. I don't think this is a bad one. And you also had Battlestar Galactica that came out as well. And you know, I really am a fan as well, just to mention it. I'm a big fan of practical special effects, and I really do like these dogfight battles in these old movies. You know, you can almost sort of like see the rivets on the spacecraft and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, CGI is good. It's doing some great stuff today. But I am a fan of this type of special effect. You know, back to basic, old school. You can see the special effects artists have just made this stuff up, and I am a big fan of that. So yeah, Battle Beyond the Stars. Yeah, it's a fun movie. It's a bit cheesy. Don't mind that at all. So if you have seen it, hopefully you're a fan. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's just a whole ton of 90 minutes fun. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Before I close the show, just do a little bit of admin. I am a proud member of the Legion Podcast Network, so please go and check out all the other shows on there, including my other show, which is the Mystery Vault Podcast, which I'm having a whole ton of fun with at the moment. It's all about mysteries and the unexplained. I've just recently done the Philadelphia Experiment, which was a strange case, and my next episode for that will be vampires, so please go and check that out. That is, you can find that the same as Bitesize with Spotify, iTunes, YouTube and several other players. And remember, if you want to leave me some feedback on there, it'd be much appreciated as well. Especially on iTunes and Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. So let me know how I'm doing. Good stuff, negative stuff, I don't mind, let me know. I've also got a Facebook page, which is where I'm most active on. That's where you can get me if you want to sort of put down a movie recommendation. Also check out, as I mentioned, with the special effects and all that sort of stuff, I have a page called From Rags to RJ's From Rags to Movie Props, where I make movie props out of scratch in my shed. I will literally pick up some soft pine and some tubes and I will go and make something from a movie, which I absolutely love. So go and check out my page on there. So I like to keep myself busy with all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's it, guys. What am I going to be doing next? I don't know. I don't know. I didn't even know I was going to do Battle Beyond the Stars, so that's how I'm rolling at the moment. I literally just, I could be driving down the road, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll go, let's do this movie. It will just come into my head, so it'll be a surprise. I will think of something to do, so wait and see. So yeah, that's it. Keep it bite-sized, keep it safe, and I'll see.
If you enjoyed this show, then make sure you check out the other great shows on the Legion Podcast Network, like Cinema Psyops, Cinema Beef, Devour the Podcast, Duncan and Bo Come Correct, Exploding Heads Horror Movie Podcast, Friday the 13th, Get Slayed, The Helming Power Hour, Hello, This is the Doom Show, Hero Hero Go Show, Kill the Cast, Underwater Kaiju from Outer Space, Jerry Hates Action, Legion After Dark, Mental Health, Obsessive Cinema, Discourse, Pick 6 Movies, the podcast by The Cemetery, the podcast on Haunted Hill, the Psychosemantic Podcast, Rick Radio, House of Wax, Dude Looks Like the 80s, Rabbit and Red Radio, the Shadecast, Short Bus Cinema, 2 Drink Minimum Commentaries, the VD Clinic, Who Will Survive Horror Podcast, and Witch vs. the Doomsday Clock. With such a wide spread of shows, there is guaranteed to be a niche for you to fall in love with. Horror, politics, movies, books, sex, music, commentaries, health, video games, kaiju, action, news, comedy, and opinions that would most likely get you killed in some parts of the world. We are proud to bring you some of the best podcasting in the world. Check us out at www.legionpodcast.com, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other dark corner of the internet where podcasts can be found.